Now 6 o'clock, and I call to order the council workshop meeting, April 3rd, 2024. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, I'm going to go a little bit off script before we get into citizens to be heard, just to recognize, and especially Chief O'Donnell, your rig still smells like smoke. We had, as I think probably many of you know, we had a fire here in town, pretty significant one that affected 120, 130 people were displaced at the apartments on Spring Road. So I want to thank a number of fire companies and other organizations who helped out. And before I do that, I'm just going to note a couple things that I heard from the fellow firefighters that and from the deputy mayor. And I'm not scolding anybody. I'm sure I'm not scolding anybody who's in the room, but really important for the public when there's a scene like that to make sure there's space for rigs, to be able to apparatus to get in and out of the scene. And also, please don't run over hose. We had a supply line that was run over that could damage coupling, that could actually cause the hose to burst, a number of things. All that means is no water supply to firefighters and people who may need it, and could endanger lives. With that said, a whole bunch of fire companies arrived at that scene, along with other organizations. So I want to thank, of course, Union Fire Company and Carlisle Fire and Rescue Services, conveniently located right up the street, almost right across the street from the fire. Of course, our police department, and unfortunately, Chief Landis can't be here tonight. Carlisle Barracks Fire Department, Monroe Fire Company, New Kingston Fire Company, North Middleton Fire Company, Citizens Fire Company, Mount Holly Springs, then Cumberland Goodwill EMS, and Carlisle Regional Special Police. I just swore in another one this evening. Cumberland County Incident Management Team, which I understand Chief O'Donnell did an amazing job helping displaced residents. American Red Cross, the American Red Cross, and Homewood Suites, which stepped up and gave space to all those displaced residents too. So amazing job by everybody. Of course, all our volunteers, mostly volunteers at those fire companies, along with all the paid staff. So again, I've had the opportunity to walk through the apartments a couple days ago with Chief Grimes and Chief O'Donnell. They're making quick work of it, but it's going to take some time to get those folks back in their apartments. So thanks again, Chief O'Donnell.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next is citizens to be heard. So if there's any member of the public who wants to discuss any matter of borough business with us, now's your opportunity to make a comment. You'd have to step up to the podium, give us your name and address. Is there anybody who wishes to do that? I see none. Do we have anybody by Zoom? Okay. Going once, going twice. Nothing? Okay. All right, next, we're going to do a mayoral recognition, and I'm going to step down to the podium for this. We have the mic on. Thanks, Steph. Okay, and Lorraine, you can come on up with me. So as Lorraine Schlegel makes her way up, tonight I have the joy of introducing Lorraine Schlegel as the inaugural community co-responder of Carlisle Borough. Once again, for this program, thank you to Borough Manager Susan Armstrong, to Chief Tara Landis, who, as I noted, cannot be here this evening with us, and especially to our HR Manager, Amy Barrier, for helping us lay a solid foundation for this program that will have a tremendously positive impact on our community for years to come. Also, thank you to our co-responder program committee members. Here with us tonight is our Parks and Recreation Director, Andrea Kraus, Sergeant Rosinski, Officer DeMartel, and Code Enforcement Officer Malcolm Markowitz. They're all an integral part to making sure this program continues to be, what will be, and then continues to be successful going forward. Now, one of my favorite works of literature is Inferno by Dante Alighieri. In that epic poem, the Roman poet Virgil You didn't expect you were going to hear about literature tonight, I know. Virgil was Dante's guide through the 9 circles of hell. In the journey through the complexities of mental health, substance abuse, and housing issues, the co-responder embodies the role of Dante's Virgil, guiding individuals, should they choose, through their personal hells toward eventual renewal. The co-responder navigates the labyrinth of challenges of their client's struggles, offering guidance, support, and wisdom along the way. Through empathy and understanding, they provide a steady hand amidst turbulent times, offering reassurance and assistance in overcoming obstacles, providing opportunity to embrace a brighter future, which only strengthens our community. Lorraine is the first such guide we will have here in Carlisle. She will also put the detailed touches on how this program functions. Working with our police, codes, and Parks and Recreation departments, co-responder Schlegel will work to connect our residents in need to the continuity of service needed to improve behavioral health and other social service outcomes for them. Co-responder programs help minimize the risk of harm to individuals who are in crisis. They increase effective access to mental health services and substance use disorder treatments, and reduce the costly use of hospital emergency departments, jails, and prisons to address behavioral health needs. Lorraine comes to us directly from Franklin County Probation, where she helped guide individuals to successful reintegration into their communities. Before that, she was a life skill worker and a teacher assistant who provided instructional assistance to emotional and learning support students. She brings to Carlisle her certifications in crisis intervention, de-escalation, and with assessment tools that help identify factors that drive a person toward negative behavior. Lorraine is the mother of her 2 precious daughters. I'll let you introduce them if you want to. And is married to a firefighter, Steve. Thanks for being here tonight. She has a passion for assisting those with mental health needs. Lorraine exudes a calm, peaceful positivity that helped make her the unanimous choice of the interview committee. So please join me in giving Lorraine a big Carlisle welcome.
Good evening, everybody. As you said, my name's Lorraine Schlegel. And as Mayor Schultz said, this is a one-of-a-kind program that we've just started, and passion is what I have, and I'm very excited about it. It has a lot to offer. Since I've started, I've taken the time to learn a little bit about Carlisle itself, learn about the streets. I've had the opportunity to go out with some of the patrol officers. I even responded to a few calls so far, and just obtaining some of the resources to gather in my pocket for when I do get the calls and when I have the opportunity to meet with the individuals that are in crisis and need the resources that I will be able to help offer. So I'm very, 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 very excited about this opportunity, and I look forward to the changes that I can make and what it will help for the community and everybody involved.
Don't go anywhere yet. Lorraine, come on back. Lorraine, come on back. No, I know all of council is very excited about this program. So we're going to take a very brief recess. This is our inaugural co-responder. So I want everybody to come down, take a photo with Lorraine. Lorraine, if you'd like to have your family come up for the photo too, we'd appreciate that. Okay. Um, now, I'm sorry, Borough Manager Armstrong, did you want to make a recognition of anybody else this evening?
Certainly, we can
Yeah.
do
Why,
so
why don't
now
Why
if
don't we
you would
do
like.
Why don't we do that now while we're
Okay.
on this roll?
All right. Well, I am pleased to announce the hiring of Ms. Patricia Blair. Patricia, if you'd like to stand. Patricia joined the borough as of Monday, April 1st, as our executive assistant and borough secretary in the borough manager's office. So we will be relieving Assistant Manager Owen Snyder of his duty as acting borough secretary after this evening, which somehow I see a smile on his face right now. And next week, Patricia will take her seat here with council and be the official um, secretary for Borough Council, responsible under the state borough code for a number of important responsibilities, including archiving of all the meeting minutes, all the ordinances, etc. So it takes a person of great focus and detail, or being detail oriented. She fits the mold, and we're very pleased to have her. Patricia actually recently moved to Pennsylvania from Texas, has family in the area. She has over 30 years of experience as an executive assistant, working in a number of industries. She actually spent 15 years supporting 4 vice presidents, 2 senior vice presidents, and 55 salespeople across 17 states. She's been recognized for a variety of projects throughout her course of the last 3 decades, including process improvement, implementation of corporate training programs, implementation of programs which helped reduce overhead expenditures and waste. So we're very pleased to welcome Patricia. She's actually hit the ground running already, and couldn't be more pleased than to welcome her and introduce her to Borough Council and the public. Thank you.
I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you too. We're very excited. We had to build a whole program to be able to introduce Lorraine, but we're no less excited to have you on board too, Patricia.
And Owen is very, very, very excited.
Okay, next up, more exciting stuff. We have a presentation on stormwater master plan.
All right, I'll
You got it.
start off by introducing Nathan Walker. If you would sit back and think for a bit about the investment that the borough has made over the number of years the borough's been in existence in your infrastructure, and you rank that from the standpoint of cost. The pipes that you have in the ground are one of the most expensive and important components of that infrastructure. Several years ago, Borough Council undertook an evaluation of our sanitary sewer network, and that resulted in the preparation of a master plan that we've been following since, that is guiding our investment in the rehabilitation of the sanitary sewer system. Likewise, a few years later, we undertook a master plan of our water distribution system, and that resulted in guidelines that we're continuing to follow to rehabilitate our potable water system. The final chair in that three-legged stool is the storm sewer system, and you had authorized Ganna Fleming to undertake a study of our storm sewer system, develop a hydraulic model of our system to identify areas of weakness or areas where we have concerns regarding flooding, and to prepare a guide for use in the future as we go through and look to rehabilitate that storm sewer system. So this evening we have Nathan Walker from Ganna Fleming, who will give you a brief presentation on some of the recommendations of the Stormwater Master Plan.
And Stephanie, you're bringing that. You're hitting the button. Thank you. Great. So as the he talked about wastewater and drinking water. Stormwater is different because it's less of a controlled system, and there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of regulations coming from different angles. Stormwater affects. It's not just a service where it's just a wastewater service or a drinking water service, but stormwater is a service that the borough provides that people use differently. Water quality, drinking water quality or flooding, permit compliance, drainage, neighborhood drainage. Just the storm drain out in front of your house. People use stormwater services that the borough provides in multiple ways. So if you go around the borough and ask, "What's stormwater mean to you?" The developers will say one thing, the residents will say one thing, the park users will say another thing. It's all different, and so that's what we tried to work through that question of a stormwater master plan to prioritize the borough's future investment in stormwater activities and in stormwater capital projects. So we've got about 15 slides. Want to run through kind of what you have, those pipes that are in the ground, that investments that's already there. There's an estimate. It changes every year. 1.2 to 1.5 million dollars that you make annually investment in stormwater management, and that changes every year. If it's a wet year, if it's a dry year, if there's a big project, if there's not. So there's different pulses of funding that go through that. But you do have considerable infrastructure in the ground that you maintain, that you operate. But you also have your MS4 municipal. I just talk this every day. I'm sure, Susan, your municipal separate storm sewer system permit, which is your stormwater permit, which is a federal permit administered by DEP here in the state for water quality coming out of your storm sewer system. Then land use regulation, helping the community out with as developers come through, making sure the stormwater is maintained as per code, responding to residents and their issues if they've got flooding or if they've got some concerns, and then capital projects for flooding, for drainage, for asset management, for water quality. These are all current aspects of your stormwater program that we were looking at. Your drivers for stormwater management in the borough, right? Certainly flood mitigation, right? The Letort Spring Run has impact, and how we looked at how much backwater, if backwater came out of the run and into the neighborhoods, and see if that had much of an effect. We found it really did not, but it's something that we were able to study. Public responsiveness is a driver. You want to make sure that if someone asks a question about stormwater, or if a developer or landowner has a question about what stormwater management means for them, you can respond to that. Infrastructure management, to make sure that current investment that might add a 40 or 50 year lifespan when installed still operates as it's designed. That's the best investment, is keeping what already exists working the way it's supposed to work. And then water quality compliance with that MS4 program. We found 46 locations where there could be, in addition to all the activities that you need, but 46 locations that could have a capital project associated with them. And some of those are based on the flood model, the watershed model that we installed. Some are emergency response. We heard about flooding from emergency responders, and we brought that into our database of projects. But you can see they're sprinkled all the way throughout the borough. Well, we looked at some priority factors and some general factors for how to prioritize those projects, those 46 different locations. And some we were able to say, we're going to start to combine these. These share an infrastructure, a piece of infrastructure. That's one project. So we were able to condense them and define them a little bit better. But yeah, these are the priority factors. So they were weighted a little bit higher when we were looking at the stormwater management program, what projects should raise up. I did want to point out that MS4 permit compliance. I'm going to keep coming back to that a little bit tonight. I just want to throw a number out there. You can see it there, 154,000 pounds of sediment discharge reduction is the goal for the borough. That's one metric. A lot of these here are not very measurable, but that is one measurable responsibility that the borough has for the MS4 permit. But the rest are, there's some subjectivity in measuring these and prioritizing these, but this was part of the fact. These are the factors we used. So where did this land? If you can see this, we've got seven different projects that landed as the highest priority projects. Some are water quality, some are flooding, some are community development, and there's a big mix of different projects. And we'll get into those 7 in a minute. And then these are those secondary priority projects. These are some you're waiting for partners, you're waiting for PennDOT, you're waiting for development, you're waiting for something else to occur, even if it's a high priority project. And what we find is municipalities, they keep hearing from the public, this is a water quality issue, this is a stormwater issue, this is a flooding issue. What we always recommend is that municipalities keep that list. That list doesn't have to end. And people feel, hey, I'm on the list. And so right now we have 46 projects. It might have grown to 47 or 48, maybe after today, 50 or 52 with all the rain that we're getting. So keep that list and keep it an active list and keep coming back and prioritizing it. But for now, we've got those 7 that we want to focus on that are our priority recommendations. Stalled here, Stephanie. Let me hit that. There we go. All right, here we are. And so tonight we're talking specific about 3 of those. Want to mention that number 2, Mark tells us that it's a flooding issue at an intersection that's shared with PennDOT. So that's underway. I think there's some discussion about what that looks like as a partnership. So it's not like 1, 2, 3, and 6 are off the table, but you got to start somewhere. So I want to talk a little bit of detail about 4, 5, and 7 tonight, and so I've got some specific slides.
Yeah, I would just briefly say that number 6, Walnut Bottom Road, you know, when it rains, we sometimes have to close Walnut Bottom Road. That is on HAT's, what is it called? The Capital Improvement Plan.
Harrisburg Area Transportation
Yeah.
Study.
So PennDOT currently has an RFP out for an engineer to do design and planning work associated with Walnut Bottom Road. Jeff, the schedule for that is, I think, for the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, they just accepted consultant solicitations last Thursday.
So you know, that's something I think that we've talked about in the past, and residents have come in and asked about it. So that is on. That is moving forward, and therefore is not part of the 3 projects that we've circled for borough to undertake.
So let's start with the first of the 3 we want to talk about just briefly tonight. This is Biddle Mission Park, the riparian buffer. This is already in the 2020 pollutant reduction plan that the borough adopted and was approved by DEP several years ago. So if you can look on the left side, the Tort Spring Run goes from south to north on this photo. Currently there's a trail right nearby. And so we saw that as an opportunity. It is in the existing plan to extend the riparian buffer, the stream bank buffer along that. We took a look, and it's very stable at this point. It's relatively stable, so it's not a candidate for stream restoration. That's what a lot of municipalities are using, stream restoration, to make up their sediment reduction goals for their MS4 compliance. But what it is helpful for is extending that buffer, moving the trail off the bank, reducing the intensity of use right on the bank, allow that riparian buffer to stitch everything together, allow that riparian buffer to suck some of the nutrients and some of the sediment out of the stream as it goes by to improve aquatic habitat. And then what we would do is relocate that crushed stone pathway, about 500 feet of it that parallels the stream, off the stream bank, and limit stream access to allow that riparian buffer really to do more and to gain that credit that the borough is looking for. So that, there's that number. Remember that 158,000 pound number I was using before? This one gets you about 600 pounds of that. But we're going to get there. Okay, this is the Orange Street Basin. So this is if you're at Valley Meadows Park and you follow that stream. I think there's flooding that happens right there at the intersection, or if there's some wet areas in Valley Meadows Park. There's been some swales that have been built over the years. Water flows down. Valley Meadows Park is kind of the lower left of this photo, just off the photo. and that swale, that ditch goes underneath the base or below the baseball field and around those other fields to eventually land in that big rectangular area highlighted there, which is an existing stormwater basin. And it's a dry detention basin. Water comes in, water goes out. Doesn't really have much of an infiltration capacity. Water coming in looks a lot like the water coming out. And there's a lot of capacity there to that huge watershed area to change that around. I don't have the exact drainage area too, but it's 60. I don't have the number in front of me. Lots and lots of acres drain to that. You use that basin differently. You naturalize that basin. And remember that 158,000 number. This is a preliminary. This is what your pollutant reduction plan, but this is 60,000 pounds of sediment reduction coming from a facility like this. I don't know if we'll get to that number. It takes some study, but that is much more significant. So it would convert it from a dry pond to a wet pond. There'd be more habitat there. There would be different kinds of plants instead of turf grass. Right now, that facility is really not used, so it will make it a more functional use of that landscape for water quality. And you could use it for education, which is part of the borough's goal for stormwater and environmental education. And it also has some potential to mitigate flooding downstream as well. That wasn't really a concern, a goal of this project, but it could help with flooding if just take the top off those peak flows. So that's the Orange Street Basin. And then the third one we want to look at is Thornwald Park. Now this is kind of exciting. As a land use planner, as a recreation planner, as a community planner, there's a lot that could go on here. Now that 98,000 pound number that you see there, that's a pretty high estimate. And there's a lot of things that you could do here at Thornwald Park. And Mark advised us that we really get in touch with the community on this one as far as what could be done here. There's a lot of different facilities here. There's like an amphitheater. There's playgrounds. There's walking trails. What happens is the water is kind of held back below the highway at the bottom as that stream comes underneath the highway and up through Thornwald Park. But there's potential there to simply restore stream banks, simply stabilize trails, simply add a few rain gardens, maybe put in some bioswales, maybe do some very significant excavation to create some stormwater detention, retention, infiltration at this site because there's a lot of room. We don't know, but there's multiple benefits that for active recreation, for passive recreation, for public access, for flood mitigation, and for water quality. So there's a lot that could be done here that we really think the public should be engaged in saying, what does this park look like in the future, and how can it be used for managing water in the future? So I know at public meetings say, hey, Thornwald Park, it's a wide open canvas of what could happen at this place. Also downstream is Walter Bonner Road. There's flood mitigation because we know that downstream of this is another critical area for flooding. There may be ways to use this facility to mitigate flooding down Walnut Bottom Road as well. This is where this heads. This is what the number 6 that you were talking about before. This is the Molly Grub storm sewer. This is the water this is the flood inundation areas as it goes through this neighborhood. Thornwald Park is off down to the bottom left, which drains up and into this area, and then it drains out to the right of the photo on the Molly Grub down by the park, eventually into the Latour Spring Run. So there's a lot of flooding that could happen here. It's a vulnerable area. One thing we did want to show you is the modeling that we did go through for mostly the entire east side of the borough. Is a model like this. Please don't look at this, but our modelers can use this to say, hey, if we tweak this pipe here, or if we add an inlet here, or if we route water a little differently here, these models are powerful for areas like this to really say, hey, this investment in this location will have this kind of impact downstream or upstream. So there's a lot that can be done here using the existing model that we've created over the last couple of years for the entire east side of the borough to dial things up and down to see how investments in infrastructure can impact flooding up and down the watershed. So the recommended next steps in that will come in tonight with a stormwater master plan, the Biddle Mission Park, create an existing conditions plan, make sure you know where the wetlands are, you know, the sensitive features, and then a plan for trail relocation and riparian buffer design. The next one's the Orange Street Basin. Again, existing conditions plan, infiltration testing to see what that water, how much water can get put into that site, how much has to run off, and how much can sink down into the groundwater. You can just get rid of that way. And then the design and the permitting for the earth disturbance. It would be the next step there. And for Thornwald Park, again, existing conditions plan, but very different look, much higher level look at that. Concept design for what could be done. Stream restoration, green infrastructure, detention, retention, infiltration, flood. There's so much that could be done there. But to get the right people out on site to walk that and see, all right, these are some options for Thornwald Park. And then engage the public on those ideas. So those are our proposed next steps. There's a lot more in the plan about the prioritization, about the borough's current stormwater activities, projections into the future, other activities that could be done as far as site assessment and asset management are in the plan. But wanted to come with you, Mark, and I wanted to come with you with some of these first 3 action items to start implementing.
Yeah, I would say that when you look at the borough's 2024 budget and its capital improvement plan, we incorporated all 3 of those projects in the allocated budget for stormwater management and also in the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Does council have any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Just can you talk in general terms how much the projections for not total rainfall but intensity of rain are we using the most recent and I'm sure it's changing every year, and do we have any in your mind areas we might want to continue looking at based on our knowledge that rainfall intensity is going to increase over the years?
Right. So, starting at the state level, DEP is supposed to, the existing stormwater management manual for Pennsylvania is the 2006 is what we're using. They've been revising that draft for the last couple years. Things have changed since 2006. We're waiting for that new manual to come out. But you can read the draft, and you can read the draft through there what new design requirements should be, and how there are old calculations for rainfall intensity and how you should be using new measures for rainfall intensity when you're designing anything new. So that's in the new manual that will be eventually approved and in use across the state. That's one question. What I hope that is one of the questions.
That's helpful. So does that imply there's a newer version coming out fairly soon to update the 2006 numbers? And if so, do you know when I guess DEP will probably be putting those out, or do we have any insights on when that will be?
Yeah, I mean, I've expected it already. DEP's new manual, but I mean, you do have some latitude as a regulating land use in the borough to say, hey, here's our standard for managing runoff. We don't want you to use these numbers. We want you to add a safety factor on top of that. Some communities do that. You just have to be able to enforce it and apply it. But as the new DEP manual comes out, it'll take care of some of those things for you as far as the design standards for managing peak runoff, peak rate volume, infiltration volumes. So that will be coming out soon. I wish I could tell you the exact date.
Yeah, I would add that the master plan developed a hydraulic model, and that model is there as a resource. And if rainfall intensity increases in the future as it's predicted to do, you can easily put that in and see the impacts throughout the borough. I would note that just using you know, the historical data, we have a lot of areas in the borough, Wanabottom Road, North Pitt Street, and North Hanover, primarily that flood now. And we expect that they're going to be flooding worse in the future as intensity increases. Our current stormwater ordinance references the use of a 2-year, 24-hour storm event, and you know, if you look at the borough, there really isn't very many areas that are not developed. So it's the areas for you know, new development coming in are relatively limited. So it's more of looking at the borough's resources or infrastructure we have now and making decisions as far as how large do you want those to be when we go and do a rehabilitation and an upgrade project.
I think one of the reasons I just wanted to make sure none of the unforeseeable changes would potentially affect which priorities we have. If you know, if we had a crystal ball and knew, hey, it's going to increase this much, you know, we might have changed some. If the answer is no, we would press ahead exactly what we're doing, knowing we're going to have this increase. Then you know that's the best we can do. But I just wanted to make sure we had thought about that.
So the 3 priority projects we have are driven exclusively by regulatory requirements, and the regulatory requirements we have are to reduce the level of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment in our discharge by a certain date per our NPDES permit for stormwater. So that really drove the decisions on that and the estimated costs for the flooding components that were in the 4 of the 7.
And is it fair to say that I think to Councilor Hicks' point that assuming more intensity in the future, that's just going to make the bad problems worse, most likely all sort of, I'll say, leveling up, right?
Yeah, so this is an example of the maps. I think there's 15 of these. We call them hot spots where flooding is nuisance or harmful. So we studied those, and if you look at them relatively, right, they're all going to get worse to some degree. But what we did is we were able to look at these 15 different areas, see what resources they were impacting. You know, what intersections were they resident, were they commercial districts, were they other the firehouse, and that helped us prioritize those things. If it goes up another 6 inches or 8 inches, yes, likely the storms are going to get worse. But relatively, we were able to see what resources were being impacted and the relative stress that it would put on those resources. And that helped inform our priorities. But like what Mark was saying, if you dial up the intensity of the storm, you'll just see higher elevations impacting those same resources.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you articulated what I thought, which is the priority is really to hit the goal that has been set for us. But just to answer the question that I think residents will always ask, right? So on slides 3 and 6, like there's different color codings and different shapes, but I didn't know exactly what those necessarily dictated. But on the secondary projects, I think what would be helpful for the public, probably because they're always wondering, is those intersections that are problematic. Like what is the plan, long-term plan, whatever, for some of those? We all know what they are, right? So, I mean, we've already talked about Walnut Bottom, so some of them are PennDOT roads, and we have to work with them. Actually, a lot of them, I guess, are PennDOT roads. But so we talked about secondary, but I just wasn't sure what that actually means, like time frame or how we prioritize what the next, iteration is.
Right. I think when in stormwater capital planning, I think if you get a couple people in the room, staff and leaders in the room, everybody can pick out the first 2 projects. Everybody can kind of agree on those. And then you say, all right, what's your third? And for every person's going to have a very different third answer to that based on their perspective of stormwater, because they all see it differently. I think what we found was those top 6 or 7 and those top 3 rose to the top because of this regulatory requirement with the MS4 permit. So those are the top priority now. Now, as infrastructure changes, as use of these intersections, as partnerships arise, as utilities come through intersections, and it might need, you know, change, upgrades to the intersection because of a new sewer line coming through, or a new water line, or a new, pedestrian access. Those will change those priorities in the future, but they're on the list now. And I think what the part of this plan is to say they're secondary, and the drivers now are flooding or water quality or access or waiting for partnerships, which is what a lot of these colors represent. And get started on the projects that generally we agree on are the highest priority, and then reorient each budget cycle every 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Historical Properties Survey presentation.
Do I have to do anything to bring that up? Or? Oh, I'm up. I'm up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We have 8 slides. Obviously, I'm more comfortable with historic buildings than PowerPoints. So, just to introduce myself, my name is Charles Richmond. I'm the architectural historian with the ASC group. We will be working on this project, and we're very excited to be a part of it. We love to do local surveys that have some real value to the community, and this is a real good project to be a part of. And the project is the survey of the Carlisle Historic District. What that means is that we'll be doing a comprehensive survey of the existing historic district, the National Register listed district, and the National Register eligible expansion. The purpose of that is to update the resource data. I'll talk about it later, but the original survey was 1976. There was another one in 1998 and in 2000. So technologies have changed, and there's a lot of information we can collect now. We also think that this will be an important tool for the public and to help with planning priorities for preservation. Just to discuss the resources that we're talking about, the Carlisle Historic District was determined eligible, like I said, and it was determined eligible in 1979 for its historic significance and for its architecture. When it was originally surveyed, there were 1,108 properties in that district. In 1998, there was an expansion of that district, and that added another 900 properties. Another of the resources, the Carlisle Historic District, or Historic District Act, which corresponds with the National Register listed boundary. They overlap. What ASC will be doing will be conducting a survey of all the properties that fall within that historic district. So right now we're looking at about 2,088 parcels in that district that we'll be surveying. The survey will include teams of an architectural historian and an assistant. They'll be going out and visiting each property. They'll be photographing it and collecting the general information about architectural styles, exterior materials. They'll be noting additions to buildings, all that information will be collected using it's called Survey Manager and Survey 123. And that information will be collected on mobile apps in the field, and that will be downloaded or uploaded into the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission's database. It's called PA Share, if you're familiar with it. That's the database for all historic properties in Pennsylvania. Also, earlier this week we were at the HARB meeting, and we talked about the possibility for volunteer opportunities. While we'll have our architectural teams out, we're glad to have people from the borough planning department, people who might be familiar with architectural history, who might be interested in volunteering. We had a couple, I think we had 2 people who were interested from the HARB, but if there are people who are interested, we'll be offering training and working with the schedules to get them involved. And what we're assuming is that any volunteers will be generally doing photographing buildings, keeping logs, and working with historians supervising them. And this slide just shows you a little bit of the information that's going to be collected on the mobile app. The image on the left is what the mobile app looks like in the field. Our historians will be collecting using that. The image in the center is the basic information that we'll be collecting. It includes the resource type, wall material, foundation material, and other information like that. And each property that's visited will have a digital photograph taken with it. For the deliverables for this project, obviously we're going to have the PowerPoint presentation today, and we'll be doing a report that will summarize the results. The big important information that we're going to be collecting is the survey data, and that will be going into PA Share, but it will be also being provided to the borough, and that information can be incorporated into your GIS system. And that's what makes it the valuable tool that it's going to be. We'll also be collecting digital photographs of each property, and we'll be providing the GIS shape files. Right now, we have a preliminary schedule. We're doing this presentation and preparing a draft survey report that we provided to the borough, explaining what we're going to be doing, the survey methodology, and what we expect to find. Our hope is to begin the actual field survey work this month. Our first step is going to have to be entering the project into PA Share, and that's in coordinating with the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. We'll provide them a shaped file of the survey area that we're looking at, provide them the survey methodology, and they'll have an opportunity to comment on that. And as soon as they approve it, then our field survey work can start. We expect the survey to go from mid-April through June. The data entry will be reviewed. The information that we're collecting will be QC'd and reviewed in July. And then we expect to have our submission in August, and then provide all the deliverables to the borough in October. And that's the survey.
Does council have any questions?
I have a question. So under historic resources, it notes the Exhibit 3 Carlisle Historic District eligible expansion from 1998, but it didn't actually expand, right? That's not part of our, that I'm aware of, because I think our historic district ends at Lowther going to the north. But specifically, there's a section. So my question is, one of the areas that I've thought that has been overlooked has been the historically black neighborhood in Memorial Park, Hope Station area. And our friends at the Sentinel just did a wonderful article about Charles Moss, who was a black photographer, and the houses that caught on fire a couple months ago. So there's history there. They seem like, humble structures, but that's one of the areas that I've wanted to ensure that we make note of, and that we appreciate the simplicity of them, but maybe visually, but the deep history that is sometimes overlooked because of they don't have the ornate architectural elements. So my question is this just our historic district, or is there possibilities of looking at anything else like those smaller? I mean, I don't necessarily know that we have the capacity of doing all of it, but that is one section that I'm.
But the scope of our work is to look at what's within the National Register listed district, and
Okay.
the eligible district is separate. It was
Okay.
an expansion that was done. It's not listed in the National Register.
Okay.
You would have to go through a process to do that.
Okay.
If the properties you're talking about fall within those boundaries, then we would visit them. Anything outside that boundary, we would not be looking at. But again, one of the best things about a survey is the opportunity to do public outreach. I mean, doing field surveys, you always meet people, and they always give you information, and that's one of the best things about doing the survey work is the information we get, we will pass along, and that's the value of it.
What's the criteria that makes an expansion eligible?
Well, it has to. There's several layers to how we define historic properties. The National Register listed, you have to go through a process where you go to the national park, provide a nomination, and they have to approve that. When something's determined eligible, it's usually part of some compliance review project, and an agency is required to take into consideration how its project could affect something historic. And through that, a lot of properties are determined eligible but not listed. The eligible affords protection. That means an agency does have to look at it and take into account what its project would do. Obviously, National Register listed districts can expand over time too. If at some point the eligible areas you wanted to expand them, that's something that could happen. That's not part of what our survey is, but that information is there. So that's the difference. It's usually regulatory.
Okay, and somewhere we could go on and probably figure out what those eligibility standards are if we went on some website or some other resource
Sure.
somewhere, I imagine. Yeah.
Yes, the advisory council.
Figure out what
would
those
discuss.
criteria are. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Next up is the meeting minutes from March 6th. Is there a motion to approve those meeting minutes?
So moved.
Motion by the Deputy Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next up on my report, paint the town teal. So I move that council ratify approval of the YWCA's request to tie teal ribbons to the borough's downtown light posts in solidarity of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, contingent upon the following. Ribbons permitted to be hung from borough downtown street lamp poles beginning March 30th through April 30th. The ribbons need to be removed no later than the morning of May 1st. Ribbons must be secured tightly and at a height that prevents them from being easily removed by pedestrians or inclement weather. Inspect the area periodically to ensure the ribbons remain secure and in good condition. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion on this item? Obviously, a very, very important cause to many who often suffer in silence. And I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next, I move the council approve a resolution in support of the business in our site's application submitted by Real Estate Collaborative LLC for redevelopment of the Frog Switch manufacturing site. This is, of course, we all know Frog Switch very, very well, especially those on the land use reform committee. We had rezoned this site to urban mixed use was that December? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think I wasn't able to stay on for the meeting, Susan, but I think the county approved a similar letter. They did. So just looking for a second for that motion.
Second.
seconded by Deputy Mayor, and I will call the question if there's no discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion passes. On to budget and finance.
Okay, I have one item for tonight. I make the motion that Borough Council retroactively approve the purchase of 2 Chevrolet Blazer EV vehicles and the purchase of 3 2024 Ford F-150 Lightning electric vehicles through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Cooperative Purchasing Program, CoStars. The Ford vehicles will be purchased from New Holland Auto Group of New Holland, PA for $164,370, and the 2 Blazers will be purchased from Turner Chevrolet of Harrisburg, PA for $100,189.24, both of which are CoStar vendors. All 5 vehicles are fully electric.
Deputy Mayor makes a motion to approve retroactively the purchase of 5 vehicles, EV vehicles. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Stubbe Councilor Stubbe seconds that motion. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
That completes my report.
Employee relations and citizen participation. I think that's Councilor Mellon. So yeah. So in the co-chair, I'm forgetting who the co-chair is. You're the co-chair. Got it. Councilor Perry's got it. She'll need help on the second though.
Yes, I will. So I have 2 items tonight. A borough secretary and alternate borough secretary appointments. Borough Council I'm asking for Borough Council to appoint Ms. Patricia Blair to the position of Borough Secretary and Ms. Stephanie Taylor to the alternate Borough Secretary position effective April 4th, 2024.
Councilor Perry makes a motion to appoint Ms. Patricia Blair to the position of Borough Secretary and Ms. Stephanie Taylor to the alternate Borough Secretary position effective April 4th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion.
And B, for open records officer.
The motion passes. I
Sorry.
didn't quite get that out. That's all right. I thought you had something else to say on that.
Welcome.
Welcome to Secretary.
All right, second.
All right, go for it.
You would think I already had something to drink tonight. I did not. Open records officer and alternate open records officer appointments. Make a motion for council to appoint Ms. Jamie Long to the position of open records officer and Ms. Stephanie Taylor to the position of alternate open records officer effective April 4th, 2024.
Councilor Perry makes a motion to appoint Ms. Jamie Long to the position of open records officer and that go-getter Stephanie Taylor to the position of alternate open records officer. Did you get voluntold on all these, Steph? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
That concludes my report tonight.
Okay. Under public safety, I move that council ratify the execution of the collective bargaining agreement with the Carlisle Borough Police Association establishing terms and conditions of employment for the period January 1st, 2024 and ending December 31st, 2026. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Roos. Is there any discussion? No.
I just want to comment and thank everyone involved for this process. It's Richard in particular, and these can be emotional issues, and we have needs on both sides. And I think the process, from being here on my second term, I think the process is getting better, and I appreciate the good faith with everybody on both sides. That's always a good sign. When I think we're trying to operate on both sides in good faith. So just I know a lot of work went into that. It's just one little light item we have, but I appreciate the effort that went into this.
Yeah, both that, and I think you sort of suggest this too, the professionalism on both sides of it. I know Borough Manager Armstrong, I think this was probably one of the best experiences you've had, and you've had a number of these negotiations over the years. So that's great. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. And Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are two items this evening, a presentation and briefing. The first is a staff presentation on Meeting House Spring Road traffic calming. I think Jeff has given that.
Yeah. While Jeff walks up to the lectern, just a couple of things. This one and the next one are both interrelated, and they are really following up on action council took last year. Last year, council adopted a strategic plan, and one of the goals of the strategic plan was to provide for to promote pedestrian and bicycle activities, active transportation. Council also adopted a Vision Zero resolution that called for staff to look for opportunities to deploy quick and cost-effective measures to protect pedestrian safety. So Jeff will be talking about one example of that.
Good evening. We have a first question before us, which is, do we want to have what is called a neighborhood roundabout? But in order to answer that question, we've got to go through a little bit of background and some history and some new design standards. I'll try to get through these slides relatively quickly. There's quite a few of them, but I'll move at a swift pace. So the biggest problem on our roadways right now is that we have pedestrian deaths occurring at an all-time high for the last 40 years. And what's troubling is it's not only just the number, but it's the rate at which those increases are occurring. You can see by that bar chart there that they're vastly outpacing all the other traffic deaths. So why does that happen? There's a whole host of reasons for why, and so I can't really get into all of those now, but we definitely know that a very large contributor is speed. And it's especially apparent for pedestrians that a very small change in speed has a very large percentage impact on whether that person lives or dies. You can see from the top two pieces of information there, when a vehicle is traveling at 20 miles per hour, there's a 95% chance that they'll survive. But all you do is increase that to 40 and it's down to 15. And then I included this graph below because it shows that massive S curve there. Now this is for folks 60 and older, but I think that's a good demographic to look at because those are the folks that we need to protect, along with children especially. So you just see, it goes from 5% at 20 miles per hour, and then at 40, it's basically at 98%. So there, the chance is so much greater. So that's a very important thing to be thinking about, is that if we can just lower the speeds by a few miles per hour, we can greatly increase the chance that when there's a crash, the person survives, the pedestrian survives. So at Meeting House Spring Road and Forbes Road, you can see that intersection is really at the heart of that entire, or gains access to that entire neighborhood, especially to the neighborhood on the western portion. Almost every house on the western portion, a vehicle is going to have to go through that intersection. On the eastern side, a large percentage of them do. But that intersection is probably the busiest intersection in that entire neighborhood. We had a crash there last spring, and we've also had some resident complaints. Folks that are longtime residents of the borough have said that a lot has changed out there. A lot of new houses have gone in. The characteristics and the demographics have changed. And so they're concerned about what used to be a very pleasant, quiet place to walk your children around is now getting a little bit busier. And so there's concerns about not just with the crash, but for future. And they want to maintain that the ability to feel like they can walk safely within the neighborhood. I also want to point out that is at that intersection's at the bottom of a hill. It's not a huge, a really steep incline, but it is downhill. And so naturally, when you go downhill, you pick up speed. I mean, that's just something that happens when you're in the vehicle. Also, there's a lot of, in addition to the bicycle pedestrian activity I spoke about earlier, it's interesting because you can see where the borough line meanders through, and there's a lot of North Middleton Township residents that are right next to the borough residents. And interestingly enough, North Middleton Township doesn't require sidewalks. So a lot of the folks in North Middleton come to walk in the Carlisle Borough neighborhoods because it's nicer because there's sidewalks there. And then this is just kind of a side note, but you can see the large undeveloped area adjacent to the turnpike in the northern part of that picture. That is a potential site for a new 7th and 8th grade district-wide school. If that happens, there's probably going to be quite a few changes to several of the intersections in this area. But for now, we know that that's an issue, and we'd like to try to figure out how to resolve it. Okay, so why don't we just do the simple thing and put up 2 more stop signs? Well, there's 4 good reasons why. The first is that we have to conduct a engineering and traffic study, and because you can't just willy-nilly put up 2 stop signs, you got to think about, is that the appropriate response? Is that the real problem that you're solving? So PennDOT has nicely laid out an entire kind of checklist, if you will, for that traffic and engineering study, which includes warrants. And there's 5 warrants, one of which is the volume warrant. And what that basically says is there needs to be relatively equal traffic volumes on each of the approaches in order for a 4-way stop to make sense. And at this particular intersection, clearly the heaviest movement is on Meeting House Springs Road. So we don't think that volume warrant would be met. Also, if you look at the guidance from the MUTCD, which is the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices put forth by FHWA, they say that clearly you need to have the least restrictive traffic control that provides safety and efficiency. And the reason that you want to do that is you do want things to flow. You know, you don't want to have to stop someone if they don't need to stop. And then PennDOT has some guidance, and they say flat out that stop signs should not be used for speed control. So just putting up 2 more stop signs doesn't really seem to be the right answer in this particular location. So how do we get people to slow down so that we don't have bad outcomes when there's a crash with a pedestrian? Do we put more law enforcement folks there? No, I don't know if that was really going to work. Do we put a lot more signs, make the signs bigger? That's not a great option either. The sad reality is that we need to remove decision making from the equation. We need to force the drivers through geometry to slow down. And how do we do that? We deflect them. We deflect them either horizontally or vertically. Vertically, like with a speed bump, or horizontally with chicanes or other traffic calming measures. Or you can horizontally deflect with a roundabout. Are roundabouts safer than other types of intersection control? The quick answer is yes, and now we've got a lot of data to support that. PennDOT not only had their data come back showing that roundabouts are superior, but across the country, they've shown that 90% reduction in fatal crashes. I mean, that's just incredible. So why do they work so well? What's their secret sauce? They've got 3 things going for them. The first is that the sheer number of conflicts are reduced. The second is that speeds are reduced because they have to deflect and circulate around the roundabout. And then the third is that pedestrians can cross 1 lane of traffic at a time, and I'll show each of these in further detail. So on the left is a traditional four-way intersection. You can see those red dots. Each of those represents where there is a potential vehicle conflict. So you've got 32 of them there. On the right is a depiction of a roundabout. You can see that 32 number goes down to 8. Likewise with pedestrian interactions, with vehicles, you've got 24 on the traditional four-leg intersection and 8, also 8 at the roundabout. So you're just reducing the number of chances that there are that something bad could happen. The other thing that roundabouts do, as we mentioned, is speeds are reduced. Typically, the way the geometry is set up, you physically can't drive faster than 15 to 25 miles per hour, depending on how it's designed. And so that's really, in my mind, the key to how you get everyone to slow down. Okay, so, and here's the third one, pedestrians cross one lane at a time. The reason that they can do that is what's called a splitter island. So you can see that all the circulating traffic is in the middle and the pedestrians are pushed to the outsides. And you can put in what's called a splitter island that orients the vehicle, already starting to make the turn to slow them down before they enter into the roundabout. And so the pedestrian can look one direction, say, nope, there's no traffic there, continue to the middle of the island, look the other direction, good, and proceed on, as opposed to having to look in lots of different directions all at the same time. So what is a neighborhood roundabout? And I apologize for taking that long to get to that, but you kind of need that context in order to understand why these things may or may not work. The quick answer is they do work. But so what Burlington, Vermont did is they said, all right, well, you know, we know that the roundabout is a superior traffic control intersection device. So, but we don't have the money to go in and reset curb lines and retrofit all of our intersections to make them roundabouts, are the ones that make sense. You know, is there a way to kind of create a roundabout without disturbing the curb line? Because that's what's expensive. And they came up with this concept, which is shown here, where it's not just plopping in a center island. As you can see, they've got several pieces of design criteria for how you should set this up. But there are two things I want to point out about this. One is that you'll notice that the pedestrian crossings, again, are pushed to the outside of the circulation area. And number two is the green box. You want that center island to be pretty big. You don't want to leave too much space between the curb line and that center island, because then the vehicle could essentially just drive straight through. You need that island to be big so that they're forced to make that right and then curve around the center island. So at our traditional intersections, where you've got the crossings right at the corners of those 4 radii, you can see where I have those 4 red arrows. You're literally putting pedestrians right in the middle of the travel lane. And that's why the roundabout design pushes the pedestrian crossings to the outside. And that is, so now we're like, okay, we believe and we know that these neighborhood roundabouts are good, but we don't have a situation where they can fit because our crossings are in the wrong place. So how do we deal with that? This is just a further kind of visual with a real intersection of why the crossing and the crossing within the circulating traffic area just is not going to be safe. And it also shows the 2 short red arrows where you can have the pedestrian looking for crossing one direction of travel at a time. And that white vehicle there, which is circulating around, is literally driving in the crosswalk parallel to the crosswalk. I mean, we have cars going perpendicular to the crosswalk all the time, but cars going parallel is not a good plan. So Mark and I discussed this, and in general, we don't want to create a crossing that goes diagonally. You want a crossing that goes straight across, because that minimizes the amount of time that the pedestrian is in the roadway. So straight across, good; diagonal, not so good. However, that might be the only way that we can get around this particular solution because of the geometry of our intersections. So essentially, the pedestrian leaves that corner of the radius, they walk diagonally a little bit until they get to the splitter island, then they walk straight across, then they walk diagonally again. That's one option that we came up with. But then there's a second option. Jared was in DC on Friday, and he's texting me and saying, "Oh, what about this? What about this?" So we talked more, and we think that we have come up with a possible solution that is a little bit better. And it's a little bit better because that center island now is bigger, which forces that deflection. And what this does is it creates a little buffer zone around where the pedestrian departs and kind of pushes them to the crosswalk. Now it's a little circuitous. Are you going to get someone that just runs across, not in the crosswalk? They may well do that. But I think that this design is probably about as good as we're going to get for the configuration that we have. Now, just a side note, this is all paint, and the little circles are flexible delineators. So, and again, no curb lines are moved. So it is relatively inexpensive to put this up as a temporary condition. And just to figure out roughly what that cost would be, I'm going to cut to the chase and say it's about $15,000 worth of plastic materials and paint. We actually had a line item in the 2024 budget for $50,000 under the Vision Zero Capital Projects Fund, and I think that's what this money was intended for, to try to figure out how do we save lives on our roadways. And so what we're asking of council this evening is, do you agree with the three next steps that are outlined there? And the first is to work with first responders and the Carlisle School District to make sure that their vehicles can actually negotiate. We could just put up some temporary traffic cones for the geometric configuration and see if they could drive around. The second is that we would need to conduct outreach and education with the residents in the neighborhood. And then if those two things are both a positive, then we would request allocating out of that 50,000, 15,000 for the purchase of those materials that would be installed by borough forces. I know it was a lot. I talked quickly, but are there any questions?
Any questions from council?
I don't have a question per se. I think it's more of a comment. So I don't know how many of you have driven on 2nd Street since they changed it. It used to be the one way and now it's 2 ways. I like the roundabouts. Now it's a bunch of them because it is a busy street, but also it's like they're kind of like speed bumps that they have in between, which also I think is pretty cool as you're going on it. But I think, like for me, the first time it was different because I had not seen that before.
Yep.
Where they had like the speed bumps, and then you get to the next area, the next intersection or whatever, and there's the roundabout. But I mean, is that? And I guess it would also depend on where we put where we put the roundabouts, on whether or not you would even consider doing something like that. It might be too much, I guess.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to are the speed tables. So they ramp up and then they're flat for a little bit and then they ramp back down. They're very effective because again, it's that vertical deflection that causes people to slow down or forces them to slow down. So yes, that's another tool in the toolbox. And actually, we're going to have a meeting with Eastside Neighbors next Wednesday, the 10th, and Dawood is going to be presenting a whole bunch of traffic calming options for Bedford and East Streets. So they could look something more similar to what you've seen on 2nd.
I had a question as well, which is related to the tables. And I know that there's obviously not money in this particular budget to cover something as expensive as tables.
Right.
I'm a very short person. I am 5'1" on a good day. And one of the biggest factors that leads to serious injury, especially for children, is the enormous size of modern cars. I have been in the giant parking lot, standing in front of trucks that very well could not see me, especially as we potentially introduce more children and more children pedestrian traffic in this area, having a raised space, the tables, where children could be, or short people, as myself, could be more visible to someone who's driving a very, very tall vehicle. Again, I know that there's no, those are expensive propositions, and I think that this is a really good step. But I would love to see something that sort of helps make that a more equitable space for the disparity between heights of children and short people and drivers.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. In fact, the combination of speed tables and the roundabout is what they use in Harrisburg, and it makes a lot of sense. You slow them before they even get to the intersection, and then of course, so you've got the vertical deflection first, and then you've got the horizontal deflection second. But yes, that is an issue, and the other thing there's something else called a raised intersection, and the advantage to a raised intersection, again, pretty pricey, is that the pedestrian is elevated. So now you're standing, 6 inches higher, and you're more visible. So there are lots of different ways to introduce traffic calming. The biggest problem is that it does take an investment. And so that's one of the nice things, and why we're proposing this is it's kind of like a trial base, because if we decide that there are things that we don't like, we can modify it. If we truly don't like it at all, we can remove it, and it's not a big deal. We haven't spent millions of dollars to make the improvements. So I think that's the thinking behind the approach that we're taking and proposing to you.
I like it.
I thought you were just going to end right there.
No, I like it. But I do recall a couple years ago, residents were asking for traffic calming. I can't remember exact intersection, but it's out by Second Presbyterian, and we ended up putting in a 4-way stop. And at that time, I also asked about, I didn't know it was called a neighborhood roundabout, but basically something along those lines, so that we didn't always have to put full stops if it wasn't needed, but traffic calming. So I'm actually very excited to hear that this would be an opportunity to test it out in this intersection, but then also hopefully be able to look at those interventions in lower cost ways. But then a lot of times, hopefully, like some of these things do pilot up, and then we can add some of these other more expensive interventions as we see fit. And additionally, in one of these meetings, so many meetings over the years, but I did learn. About busing systems through the school district, and how that whole neighborhood has to have bus service, because North Middleton, that little, you can put that map back up, it's on North Street. There's a little section of North Middleton, and they didn't put in sidewalks, and if there's not a contiguous sidewalk, then they have to get bused. So if they would put a new building up there, I think it could also save the taxpayers, because there's the possibility of adding some sort of walkability from that neighbor directly to the school district. So there's interesting things that people don't always know about when they're looking at these neighborhoods and developments, and what, why sidewalks are important in other ways, and school districts and busing service is a huge expense and a huge logistical hurdle. So I would be interested to see, we're all interested to know how the school district's going to move forward on that, but that's another thing that could change the dynamic of the walkability for school children in that area as well.
Absolutely.
And one thing, when we talk about, and I think it's great to always have our fire friends come and do the turns and stuff, but I did see, for all the public that says that that intersection won't allow a fire truck, I saw the fire truck turn from B up to Pitt on that that tight little intersection on Sunday, and he did great, and the infrastructure was fine. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Councilor Stevens.
Yeah. So to clarify, everything in the image design would be paint, essentially, including the center island.
Yes, but they would also have the flexible delineators, which are just plastic pieces that stand about 3 feet tall, and they can't be hit and come back up. If they're hit enough times, they need to be replaced. But yes, it gives a definite visual change and alerts the driver to the fact that they're coming into something different.
Okay.
And then the center island itself is just going to be 8 essentially black and white curb stops that are formed, and then there'd be a signpost in the middle indicating that it's a roundabout.
Okay, that makes sense. I was initially thinking it was just paint, and then I was kind of confused as to like what would prevent somebody from just driving right over it. But that makes more sense. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. The reality is that someone could just blow through there pretty quickly. But if we can get that center island a decent amount out, it's going to force them with some deflection. Ideally, we build it similar to what we have at B Street, where you've got a center island with a truck apron. I mean, that's the ideal, where tractor trailer even, let's just say a moving van for that area. A moving van could have their rear wheels mount that truck apron. That's the ideal design situation, but it's also very expensive.
I've seen a full tractor trailer go around that roundabout too, just for reference.
There you go.
May I ask a silly question? And please forgive me, but a free answer maybe is lowering the speed of traffic. Is there, like, for me personally, as I've gotten older, I found that people drive much too fast, and perhaps that's just a condition of my age. But it is a pedestrianized development, and effectively 25 miles per hour means that cars are traveling at 35 miles per hour, and that means that is much closer to the 40 miles per hour, which leads to more egregious pedestrian or citizen injury. And so lowering the speed limit to 20 miles an hour, which then effectively would be 30 miles an hour, because I'm the only one who maybe drives the speed limit, it seems. But it would bring the number down to a more manageable speed for folks that are driving above the speed limit.
You're absolutely correct if people go the speed limit, and that's the problem. And that's what I was alluding to in the beginning part of the presentation, is that people travel at the speed they feel comfortable, and so we have to force them to slow down through geometry.
I agree, definitely. I'm just saying is that it could be an interesting 1-2 punch of having a adjustment to the pattern of traffic and also requiring a lower speed limit, especially in a neighborhood, again, that is so densely populated like this one and is purposefully planned. And again, a very minimal cost of, just putting up new signs. So
Yeah, no, actually, I could think of an exact situation where the city of Hoboken, they've made the news recently because they've had 0 pedestrian deaths in the last 7 years, which is just crazy. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for why they're we'll call it an advantage to do that. But they did exactly that. They lowered the speed limit to 20 miles per hour, in addition to all the other traffic calming measures they put in.
Any other questions? A couple comments and then a question. One, I note that we're subsidizing walkers from North Middleton.
Yeah.
Two, every time we send Jared to Washington, he finds something of use down there. So might want to maybe a monthly trip for Jared to DC and see what he finds. Question: if you can jump back to slide 18. I think it's one more, that design. Yeah. So I'm just imagining for a walker going through here, probably not too difficult to navigate, since we're not changing where the curb aprons are. If I'm in a wheelchair or something like that, seems like it would be a little more difficult to navigate.
That is correct. We're not going to be able to provide a full 4 feet probably. So there would be, but I mean, that line is going to be 6 inches wide. So they're going to be hugging that curb line, which means one of their wheels might be slightly into the travel lane. But yes, it's not perfect.
Right.
but I think that it's doable. I mean, right now they've got if they're in a wheelchair, they've got no protection, right?
Right.
At least now they'd have a white line protecting them.
It's an improvement over
Right.
over
It's an
what is,
improvement
although
over
not
what we
ideal.
have now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Well, and likewise strollers. So,
Right.
yes.
Strollers. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, we have a briefing on Safe Streets for All demonstration grant. Mark, are you handling that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take this very quickly. So, the last 7-8 months or so, several borough staff members have been actively participating in Tri-County Regional Planning Commission's Safe Streets for All initiative. Jeff Bergson's one of them. Mr. Woolston also participates, and I think some of our police officers also go there. And they've been working on potential projects to submit for grant funding. Very recently, so this is quite dynamic, and it may change from what I say now till next month, but we thought it was be helpful to brief you on this. Tri-County Regional Planning Commission was in contact with Federal Highway, who informed them of some a good pot of potential grant funding, and the active transportation, or the Safe Streets for All committee was brainstorming potential ways of utilizing that funding for the region as a whole, and potentially came up with a project that would involve a collaborative among numerous municipalities in Cumberland County and in Dauphin County, submitting a joint grant application with Tri-County that would request funding to purchase equipment and materials for things such as Jeff just talked about, or putting in temporary bicycle lanes or other temporary measures that you then study. And if they appear to improve safety, then under the next round of grant funding, request specific funds for construction of permanent infrastructure. So there is included in your meeting packet a PBS that gives a little bit more information about this, and we may be coming, if this all works out well, we likely will be coming back to council and requesting approval to submit a joint permit application with the other municipalities that are participating with Tri-County for a Safe Streets for All demonstration grant. The application deadline is May 16th. The committee, I believe, is meeting weekly. Tomorrow is their next meeting to again work on specifics related to this. Very briefly, it's a 2-year program that, if the borough participates, may involve perhaps $500,000 for the borough with a requirement for a 20% local match. We could include, as part of the local match, borough staff to do the construction of the temporary measures and also the analysis of the results. So more to come on this, but just wanted to take this opportunity to brief council.
Thanks, Mark. I didn't know if anybody.
Yeah. Any questions?
Okay. Before we end the Public Works report, I did just want to piggyback off what Jeff mentioned. Next Wednesday, April 10th, at the Carlisle Alliance Church at 6 p.m., there's a public outreach meeting on the proposed traffic calming measures along Bedford Street and East Street that had been discussed before for anybody who'd like to attend. So,
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Stubbe. Sustainability and community planning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 items tonight. I'll let, looks like Jerry will probably take both of these. let them do both in the zoning reform update, and then DCNR urban tree grant briefing, of which I'm sure he'll reference the documents that are in front of us. But over to you, Jared.
Sure. I just have a quick presentation to give just a little bit of feedback, and the substance of what we're talking about would be provided in a PBS memo to council on April 11th, but you can go to the next slide. The last sort of 3 items that the Land Use Reform Subcommittee's working on, from the last, I guess, year of effort is group homes, fee in lieu of parking, and accessory dwelling units. Now, there's still a pile of work to be done, but these are kind of the last of the 3 big recommendations. So we'll, I guess, sort of jump into the next thing. The staff are ready to make a recommendation to council at the next meeting to direct the solicitor to draft and advertise text amendments for fee in lieu of parking. We've added to the recommendation that council's already been briefed on several times, and a butter notice template that staff would take we're going to try to draft something for the solicitor to approve, but essentially the template notice for abutters within 200 feet of where this fee in lieu of parking would be asked of council would articulate something about the analysis that went into the intended request, and it would also sort of provide the opportunity for the public to come in and talk to staff about the request. We're not necessarily hoping to remove any public comment, but we are trying to help facilitate a process in an organized way so that people on council and people within the public are informed as much as they can be before a public meeting. So that's what that's intended to do. So you'll see that April 11th. And then group homes, council's been briefed on group homes. We did have some back and forth with an entity that was planning on doing something sort of creative within the community, and hope to get maybe a text amendment built into this recommendation. We're still sort of working with that group, but it's sort of what they're trying to do is outside the scope of the initial recommendation. I will say there's kind of 2 things that potentially could change from when staff provided the initial recommendation for group homes and treatment centers. One item in staff opinion is not substantive, that would sort of further consolidate the definitions of dwelling and dwelling unit, incorporating the changes that were proposed by the solicitor that provided advice on this text amendment, and just sort of deleting an unnecessary definition. That goal of sort of deleting definitions and unnecessary text from the zoning ordinance has been offered to council through the land use reform review early on, and so just taking the opportunity to kind of delete some text and keeping the substance of what the ordinance does is a nice opportunity. So we'll bring that in the recommendation. And as far as group homes within the C3 and C4 districts, I think it would be helpful to staff to know how council wants the recommendation framed. You'll recall at the last meeting where we had a discussion about group homes, one of the solicitor's recommendations was to sort of conform to commercial zoning and delete the special exception discretionary review process for group homes within the C3 and C4 zoning districts. And staff advised that because C3 and C4 allow residential uses, it seemed an opportunity for council to sort of keep that going and not delete group homes from special exception. But again, because the attorneys have reviewed this for compliance with um, um, the Fair Housing Law and Americans with Disabilities Act, and current practice, frankly, you could go either way. So that's one item where staff would just kind of like to know what council wants. Do you want to see group homes deleted from commercial areas where they're currently permitted by special exception, as recommended by the solicitor, or do you want to keep them? So that's where we're at with those two items. And accessory dwelling units. Councilor Mellon's not here, but she gave us a lot of sort of food for thought at the last meeting to kind of look at what accessory dwelling units could be used for in the future that might be sort of something that we could capture through the rental program. And so the land use reform committee did think it made sense to sort of get into the rental dwelling ordinance that council's already adopted and sort of look at short-term rentals, as well as capture some of the exemption language that we've heard from the public with regard to rentals designated for family. And that's where we're at with ADUs. So that's what I have tonight.
Any questions for Jared? No? Thank you.
If you want to go ahead and educate us on, as needed on the urban tree grant application.
Yeah, I don't have a presentation for that, so I'll just tell you what's. Oh, I guess I do have a slide. One slide. That's it. No more text. These are two sort of census tracts that are designated by the federal government and state government as sort of vulnerable areas for different reasons. The reason they're on the screen tonight is because those are the eligible areas for a grant that staff submitted today, and we'll be asking for council to sort of ratify a resolution after the fact at the April 11th meeting. Council's sort of approved some policy goals through adopting the Climate Action Plan and the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations to add tree canopy in certain parts of the borough that have limited access to nature and limited tree canopy. I presented at a meeting with DCNR staff. I was invited to present on behalf of the borough with county staff and staff from Dickinson about climate action planning, and that was like 3 weeks ago, and they alerted me to this grant opportunity with funding from the federal government that they're basically just really encouraging any municipality with a good project to apply for. So we put together just a quick grant application for $463,740 worth of work and trees in these two census tracts over a 5-year period. And basically that would buy the borough about 300 trees, 5 years of maintenance. It would get us contractor support to kind of install the trees and work with landowners. And it would also get us, the opportunity to get some tree tender training for up to, 5 staff or volunteers. I apologize to council for not telling you about this earlier, but this stuff moves pretty quick, and we wanted to act on the opportunity.
And there's no match.
Yeah, that's the big one. Sorry.
Right.
No match.
Right. Questions, comments?
Good job.
If you'll indulge me, since this is sort of, we're recognizing new folks, I know he's not here. But I know Jared has a new member of his team, and I'd love for everyone who doesn't already know who that person is and what they'll be doing.
Sure. So we hired a policy and GIS analyst to fill a vacancy in the borough in my department, and I hired Deb Sinha, who's a former, well, I guess he's still a professor at Dickinson College, to kind of help us out with some of this stuff. And I've been working with Deb for probably the last year. And trying to secure funding through Dickinson College for a couple of different opportunities for students. He sent us Natalia, who helped us out with the East High Street program, the East High Street analysis, and 2 interns and funding opportunities for those to pay those interns that are currently working in my shop right now. On the lead service line inventory and an interactive map, and a sort of a map that's looking at discretionary reviews in sort of different parts of the borough and how that affects people. Deb's great to work with, really. If anybody, I think several people have met him, but anyway, it's nice to work with, somebody that really cares about local efforts and wants to sort of, think deeply about sort of local policy and how to help out. And Deb's really going to be influential and helpful to me, and I think to the community. With this grant in particular, the tree grant, it's nice to sort of be able to paint in broad strokes instructions. Go look at the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations that council adopted. Go look at the strategic plan, the climate action plan. Go look at this thing from York, where they're applying for the same thing in Philadelphia for what they did for, a 30% increase to tree canopy. Put it all together for me. Let me take a look at the draft. I mean, he cranked that out in a day. So he's already paying dividends, and he's only been working for me for 2 days. So.
Well, thanks. We're going to get max use out of that ArcGIS license, so it's running hot and heavy, so it's good to have somebody who's going to get good leverage from that. But,
Deb's also a advocate for the skate park, and his kid goes to the skate classes, and I've been in his class twice now, talking about all things borough. So his class is, I can't remember the exact title, but it's like hope in like the destruction of climate change. It's the weird title, but it's like hopeful yet not so much. That anyway, I'm a shining light for 20 minutes, I guess. But welcome, Deb.
Yeah, great to have him. Thanks, Jared, for those updates. That completes my report.
Okay, thank you. Now's another opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody here in Borough Hall who would like to provide any public comment? Is there anybody by Zoom? Okay, and this is so if I keep talking, this is Owen's last time as secretary. He's going to need to put all this down. So I'm just going to keep going for the next 40 minutes. If everybody else wants to leave, you can do that. But thank you, Owen, for your secretarial duties over the last several months. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.